Salutations, Utopians Global here. Hope all is well in your world. Hope everyone's mental health is okay. Um, just finished watching the Knicks and Celtics great battle. Uh, Good to see the Knicks putting up a fight against, who looks to be the perennial favorite to win the championship for the moment. I mean, anything can happen. And what I mean by that actually segues into what happened today. Um, with the coach who I have a deep reverence for and a high respect. Um, Mike Malone was terminated today despite the Denver Nuggets being in contention. And for me, that it really, I don't know any of these people, but basketball has been a vessel and an escape for me in the reality of life. And I'll never forget Mike Malone's contribution to a very talented DeMarcus Boogie Cousins, in his Sacramento era. People said he was difficult. People couldn't get through to him, and to see, you know, the work that he put in, uh, in terms of laying the foundation for the Sacramento Kings, and he was fired really bad. And so this season, when Mike Brown, a fellow peer of his, who's been on his coaching staff, etc., was terminated, he had some choice words. But before I pivot from that, um, you know, as a person who you could say is a familiar face in the land of the lost, uh, it really warms my heart to see a coach when he's really able to connect with a player on a deeper level than just basketball. And you could tell, DeMarcus Cousins was an immensely talented big man who, if probably played in a different market, would have done a lot more. But obviously, Sacramento is like so many small markets, full of a rich history of shortcomings, despite orchestrating some unbelievable rosters. And the connection he had with such a disturbed individual who was immensely talented, but also what was considered deemed a hothead. I still never forget the time, he got up into a local reporter's face, or, his altercation with Sean Elliott, who was battling some extreme health complications of his own. Um, and for Mike Malone to put him under his wing and to try to really reel in the franchise player that he was, because Boogie was borderline as dominant as Shaq at one point. And he had a jumper, but he was in a league. You can't, if Boogie came along, and I don't know the exact timeline, but if Boogie would have came along the same time Dwight and Andrew Bynum were playing, he would have probably gotten even more recognition. But his time window was different, and everything's about cycles. I always tell people Zion is in the wrong time in the league right now. You would be seeing we're missing a phenom, and kudos to him for fighting as hard as he has, because we've seen other people, more notably Ben Simmons, for instance, kind of give up over time. And you see Zion is still putting up a fight and hanging on to the dream. Got shut down again, but Boogie gave the NBA some of the best years we've seen from a center in a long time. He was like Moses Malone-esque out there. And a guy like Mike Malone, stayed classy, kept his chin up, and then got another opportunity with the Denver Nuggets years later. And while he was in the glorious seat throne that he was in, spoke highly of Mike Brown post-termination with the Sacramento Kings, who've always been wildly inconsistent of a franchise. When things are good, they're really good, and when they're bad, they can be really bad. And to see him, at the height of his career, speak out for what he deemed and what we all kind of were shocked to see now, which apparently was the beginning of a new era of the NBA in terms of the coaching carousel, where guys can get fired mid-season regularly. I mean, we've seen David Blatt get terminated, but, international guy, you kind of chalk it up to maybe there's a culture difference, something that's not hitting right. And to see, Mike Brown get fired, it was one thing, who really seemed to have found his gear with the Kings and, did so much for that franchise. But, and then you see Tyler Jenkins, who had the Grizzlies at the time and thinking the second seed. And a lot of that turns out to be politics. I think Gilbert Arenas stated that he believes maybe, some of it had to do with Jenkins sacrificing his job to make sure that, Jackson was getting his minutes to, achieve his Supermax contract because he is in contention for Depoy, which would obviously open him up to another, I think either it's like 100 or another $200 million. And Memphis is a relatively small market, and their attendance record, I think last I checked, was in the 20s in the league. I want to say 22 to 27, something like that, last I checked. And so, obviously it's a business also. And, but this one really hit home because honestly, his whole demeanor, his swagger, the way he carries himself, again, and I don't know him, but I have a pretty good grip on understanding, seeing people and having a pretty good fair assessment of what I'm looking at, and everything he's ever presented, everything he's about is so commendable, and I have just such a high respect for this guy. And it's like the NBA, it kind of scary sometimes now because it's like it is super fast paced on steroids. Like it's become a different level of psychotic. Coaches getting fired, players traded, ownerships changing for record-setting numbers, and even then, I mean, we've seen with the Wolves, but it's like the headlines this year have been mind-boggling, to say the least, and it really makes me sad when a guy can win a championship just 2 years ago and can be terminated in the season. Like, doesn't he at least get afforded the respect of finishing that year out? It's just like we've become so cold-hearted and I come from a cold place, but I'm just saying, like, it's weird when you see it on a national level. When you see wealthy people, at least they try to dress things up. You want to fire somebody, the person stepped down due to family. I grew up in that kind of environment where someone is not good at their job. At the end, we're just going to amicably split depending on how prestigious it is. But like championships, the ring chasing, the team swapping, it's created this culture where like everybody's expendable. And I'm at a loss of words that a guy like that couldn't even get to the finish line, at least till the off season. Granted, I want to say that there was nights where the Nuggets were, atrocious. They were god awful. And Calvin Booth thinking that all they needed was Russell Westbrook, or for whatever reason the cap forced them into that way. I just, play hardball with Jamal Murray. I'm definitely re-upping Michael Porter. I'm definitely re-upping Aaron Gordon to the finish line of his career, even though he's pushing more towards the twilight. But like Jamal Murray, I'm like, hey, I might play a little hardball with Murray. You can find guards. You can find players at the 1, at the 2. I know it's becoming more back to the traditional point guard league, but it's just obscure to me to watch this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that how expendable a coach can be this day and age, no matter what. And what does it say about championships now, where even the championship doesn't mean anything? And I'm just shocked. Like, all these teams are firing their coach as I'm watching the Phoenix Suns play right now. But they're, Mike Budenholzer is keeping his job. I personally think Brent Berry would have been the appropriate interim head coach. Like, because here's the thing. If this doesn't work out for the Suns, they go to a rebuild. I don't know Buds for being a rebuilding type of coach. But I'm hearing all these different teams firing their coaches before the postseason. And I'm like, what is Phoenix doing as they're getting smashed by 24 to the Golden State Warriors? That's who gets fired before the playoffs, on the eve of the playoffs, or with some games left. Not not Mike Malone, you know. And so it's crazy to me, you know. It really is. I don't care how much they drown him out. Like the Grizzlies, there was a sideline confrontation between Peyton Wallace and the veteran OG Aaron Gordon, and you know, I guess franchises feel like the mojo needs to be fixed. Jokic reportedly expressed some disdain for the team's overall defense. But when you look at the assembly of that roster, they really needed like a Zach LaVine, who's on a monstrosity of a contract. And I mean, earlier in the year, I suggested maybe the Nuggets should go after Lester Quinones, you know, in the G League. It was playing for the squadron, you know, but and I think now he got picked up for the New Orleans Pelicans, which is the G League affiliate. He was playing on their G League affiliate. But like, you know, I seen they're Strathern and they're deploying all these no-name guys, and I'm just like, bro, y'all need to go out there and get, you know. And I've always, and I didn't agree with the rotations. Like, I think Westbrook and Braun should always be together. You know what I mean? Bunched together, and then you go get a solid guy at the two. And people want to cite KCP, but they needed more than KCP. Just like you're seeing in Orlando, they needed a bucket getter, and to relieve the pressure, a guy who can get an ISO bucket. And Jamal Murray just hasn't been the same this year. And their team, you know, who coming off a championship just 2 years ago, they're bored with the regular season. It's hard to get through the season, but you can trust that they were going to find themselves in the postseason. You know, I don't necessarily know if these are basketball mind decisions being made. These are billionaires who are like, I'm bored, and I'm the one paying for all this, so I say go do this. But like, you can't solve the fact that you don't have a bucket getter at the two right now. You know, which is fundamentally what the issue is, and you're not going and barring any 2003 fortune of luck. Not that I wish it on anybody. Let me be very clear. We don't wish injuries on anyone, but there's going to be factors that are going to be needed to be had, i.e., injuries, schedule, to make this thing work out for Denver if they were to go on a favorable run. But this notion like they had everything. I really enjoyed when the Nuggets were clicking this season. They were very fun to watch. One of my top 5 favorite teams to I would rush home to go watch. That Russell Westbrook, Christian Braun, Russell Westbrook fast break, unbelievable. It was cinema. It gave me the Kobe Eddie Jones fast breaks from the early Laker years. It was epic like that. Jordan Farmar, Shannon Brown fast breaks. Certain guys you just like that. They're a tandem. It was a brilliant signing. The Westbrook trade worked. I mean, the Westbrook free agent signing was a success. I don't care. Now, was it devastating, the loss that they had on TV in front of everyone against, I think it was the Lakers? Absolutely. And the owner was quoted, and I guess somehow was saying a quote that Russell said when he was with the Lakers. But that Lakers loss definitely was the nail in the coffin, I think. I knew something was going to happen. But I also kind of knew that this was kind of winding down for Mike Malone when he was so outspoken about the Kings ownership. At the end of the day, owners are going to stick with owners, right? So when you see that, like, ultimately at the end of the day, 1 second, please. And on a mini 3-day cut, all fruit. And so, you see what's going on right now, and it's just kind of like, I guess nature took its course. Definitely the party was probably over. Definitely they seem to have been drowning him out a little bit. But you still gotta, like, I don't know, man. It's just, this is welcome to the new NBA. You know what I mean? I mean, guys like Luka can get rerouted, which that I actually understood. But then you see certain things like this, and you're like, just from a moral standpoint, I don't know how you can fire a coach, especially when you know you're not going to win a chip. What are you trying to get unless the interim coach you've always wanted to replace him with, and you're just trying to get the ball rolling with no, like, something easy going where there's no pressure. But this is still devastating to witness. One of my favorite people to see on, and I always look forward to his post-game conversations when I do catch him. He's a great man. I hope he bounced back wherever he goes. I hope it's advantageous for him. He deserves another coaching job if he wants. I do hope he takes a break, probably take a year off and just regroup. But that's a guy who's a man, who's a leader of men, and um, really easy to enjoy his presence. You know, when you see him speak, he's just one of the coolest dudes I've ever seen. You know, you hope you age gracefully like that. You know, he's just a fly dude for his age, man. You know, he's got a way of talking, man. He's an interesting guy, Mike Malone, and I hate to see this happen to him. Honestly, he's one of my favorite personalities in the NBA. Just people in the NBA that I've witnessed from afar. I don't know, have any, not a media member. I've never been, you know, but it's devastating to witness and a bit of a shocker. Regardless, you know, I think both parties will find their way. Uh, I don't, you know, and good luck to the Nuggets and Mike Malone at the end of the day. I hope this was informative, Utopians. I'll try to do better next time. Global out.